The rain fell in relentless sheets, flooding the empty street with cold silence. A trembling cat crouched beside a rusted trash bin, its soaked fur clinging tight to its thin frame. Emily whispered, "How can someone leave a soul to suffer like this?" as she gripped her umbrella, eyes fixed on the fragile creature. A car door slammed nearby, and a harsh male voice muttered, "Stay here, useless thing," before fading into the storm. The cat whimpered, pressing itself low against the ground, its green eyes glowing with fear and longing. A violent clap of thunder made it stumble toward a torn cardboard box, the only shelter in sight. Emily's heart ached as she watched it struggle, her breath shaking with sorrow. "You deserve more than this," she said quietly. In that fleeting moment, abandonment, cruelty, and a sliver of fragile hope became etched into the night. The storm raged on, drowning the world in gray. Emily whispered, "No creature should know such loneliness," as she moved closer to the cardboard box. The cat shivered violently inside, pressed against the damp walls that sagged with water. Its ears flicked sharply at every sound, waiting for danger that never stopped coming. The city carried on with its distant noise, yet here the silence of neglect weighed heavier than thunder. A faint, broken meow escaped, trembling through the night like a desperate plea. Emily's throat tightened, her voice low. "I can't just walk away." Yet doubt gnawed at her chest, reminding her of responsibilities she wasn't sure she could bear. The cat's fragile body seemed suspended between fading and fighting, both choices etched in its trembling frame. Emily knew this wasn't just about saving an abandoned animal. It was about healing something inside her own fractured soul. Emily's fingers trembled as she reached toward the box, her voice soft. "It's okay, I won't hurt you." The cat hissed faintly, eyes glowing wide, back arched in fragile defiance. Fear clung to its tiny frame more than fury, claws scratching at soggy cardboard. A roar of thunder split the air, making it recoil deeper, pressing against its collapsing shelter. Emily's heart sank. She knew that stance too well, a soul hardened by betrayal. She remembered a voice from her past, cold and cutting. "Don't trust too easily. People will only disappoint." Now, she saw that truth mirrored in the trembling animal. The rain soaked through her jeans as she knelt lower, undeterred. "I know," she whispered. "I know what it's like to be left." For one suspended moment, the storm hushed, as though listening, and in Emily's eyes shone the fragile beginning of a bond unspoken yet undeniable. The rain beat down harder, plastering Emily's hair to her cheeks. She whispered, "You don't have to fight alone," her hands steady in the storm. The cat's gaze lingered, torn between mistrust and desperate need, its trembling frame too weak to hide forever. A gust of wind rattled the trash nearby, making it flinch, eyes darting back to her. Emily's breath caught, her pulse racing, not from fear but from the heavy ache of recognition. The storm was no longer just weather, it was the weight of abandonment itself. She shifted closer, her voice unshaken, "Let me help you." The cat blinked slowly, its small chest heaving as though surrender wrestled with instinct. In that fragile pause, Emily felt hope spark, a fragile, flickering flame against the storm's relentless cruelty. Emily stayed still, letting silence carry what words could not. The rain wrapped around them, heavy yet strangely distant. The cat's eyes softened, a glimmer of hesitation fading into weary surrender. Its tiny body shifted, paws inching forward across wet cardboard. Emily whispered, "That's it. You're safe now," her voice trembling as if speaking to herself as much as the animal. The storm roared, but her world narrowed to the fragile steps closing the distance. The cat's claws clicked faintly against the soaked ground, each sound echoing louder than thunder. Emily's breath caught when the small creature stopped, gaze locking onto hers, silent question in its eyes. For the first time, the storm no longer felt like despair, but the beginning of something that demanded courage, both from the cat and from her. The storm weakened into a soft drizzle, the air thick with the scent of wet asphalt and despair. Emily knelt, her soaked jacket heavy, her voice barely audible as she whispered, "You're safe with me, little one." The cat trembled but leaned slightly out of the box, its cautious steps deliberate, as if testing the trust she offered. Its green eyes flickered with both fear and hope, the battle inside as visible as the rain clinging to its whiskers. Emily extended her palm closer, her breath trembling, aware that every heartbeat echoed louder than the storm. "I know you're scared," she said gently, "but you don't have to be alone anymore." The drizzle tapped softly around them, puddles reflecting their fragile connection. For the first time, the cat's nose brushed her fingertips, hesitant but real. Emily's heart clenched, for she knew this moment was not just rescue, but the beginning of something neither of them had expected. The drizzle faded, leaving silence broken only by the soft hum of distant traffic. Emily whispered, "You're stronger than you know," as the cat stepped out of its cardboard shelter fully, tiny paws soaking in the waterlogged ground. Its fur clung in patches, but its eyes held a fragile spark that hadn't been extinguished. Emily lowered her umbrella, letting raindrops fall freely on her shoulders, her gesture quiet but deliberate. She thought of nights when she too had felt abandoned, and in that fragile cat she saw her own reflection. The animal paused near her knees, blinking slowly, a hesitant sign of trust. She murmured, "That's right, you can trust me." It was a vow unspoken, more powerful than the storm's rage, more binding than words ever could be. The night felt softer, as though hope itself had carved out a corner amid the ruins of despair. Emily reached into her bag with careful movements, pulling out a small piece of bread she had carried. She smiled softly, whispering, "It's not much, but it's yours." The cat's eyes followed every motion, its body tense, torn between instinct and need. Hunger flickered stronger than fear, its nose twitching as it stepped closer. Emily placed the bread gently on the ground, withdrawing her hand slowly, her breath steady though her heart pounded. The cat crept forward, shoulders hunched, every muscle braced as if betrayal could strike at any moment. It sniffed, then nibbled cautiously, the sound almost too fragile for the storm-beaten night. Emily felt her eyes sting with tears, whispering, "You've been starving for more than food, haven't you?" In that moment she realized this fragile being was not just surviving, but searching for love that had been denied for far too long. The cat ate slowly, each bite hesitant, as though it feared the food would vanish. Emily's chest tightened. She had seen that hunger before, not just for food but for kindness. She whispered, "You don't have to fight anymore." The animal lifted its head, crumbs clinging to its whiskers, its gaze softer now, no longer sharpened by fear. Emily stretched her hand again, this time palm upward, open, offering without condition. The cat hesitated, then pressed its wet nose into her skin, a touch fleeting but powerful enough to shatter the weight of abandonment. Emily's throat burned as she whispered, "You've been waiting for someone, haven't you?" The drizzle thinned to a mist, and the city's cold edges blurred. For the first time that night, warmth cut through the storm, carried in the fragile bond forming between a woman and a forsaken soul. Emily lifted the cat gently, her arms cradling its fragile frame as though it were glass. The cat stiffened at first, claws twitching, but her warmth wrapped around it, steady and unyielding. She whispered, "You're safe now, I promise." The words trembled but carried conviction forged from her own scars. The cat's head rested slowly against her shoulder, exhaustion overtaking fear, the rain now nothing more than a distant murmur. Emily stood, the weight of the small life in her arms grounding her, anchoring her in a storm that suddenly felt survivable. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering again, "No more loneliness." Around them, the night softened, and the harshness of the alley seemed to fade. For the first time, both woman and cat found themselves not as broken fragments but as two souls bound together by survival, trust, and the beginning of love. The night air was colder now, the drizzle replaced by sharp winds that cut through Emily's damp jacket. She clutched the cat closer, whispering, "We just need to make it home." But the cat stirred restlessly in her arms, claws twitching as if old memories of cages and betrayal haunted it even in her warmth. The alley seemed endless, every shadow stretching like a threat, every sound echoing the reminder that cruelty could lurk anywhere. A group of voices rose in the distance, careless laughter, but laced with a cruelty Emily recognized too well. Her grip tightened, her heart racing as she muttered, "Not now, please." The cat meowed weakly, its trembling merging with hers, two beings carrying scars etched by neglect. Emily pressed forward, each step heavy with both fear and determination, the fragile hope of safety threatened by the looming storm of human indifference. The voices grew closer, and Emily's pulse quickened. A group of men stumbled from the corner bar, their laughter sharp eyes narrowing when they saw her. One muttered, "Look at that stray worthless thing," pointing at the trembling cat. Emily's chest burned as she snapped, "He's not worthless," her voice cutting through the cold air with defiance she didn't fully feel. The men scoffed, tossing cruel jokes that felt like knives against the fragile bond she cradled. The cat pressed harder against her chest, ears flat, eyes wide with fear. Emily shifted her grip, shielding him, whispering, "I've got you, don't be afraid." She turned away quickly, steps firm though her knees shook. The cruelty of strangers was not new, but tonight it struck harder, because now it wasn't only her pain she carried, it was his too, and she swore she wouldn't let them break him. Emily hurried down the block, each step pounding with urgency. The laughter of the men faded, but their cruelty lingered like an echo in her chest. The cat meowed softly, the sound strained yet carrying a note of comfort, as though reassuring her despite its own fear. She whispered, "We'll be all right, I promise," though her voice cracked under the weight of exhaustion. Streetlights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly, their unreliable glow guiding her path. The city was a maze of shadows, each corner a reminder of the dangers they'd already endured. She tightened her arms around the fragile body, feeling his heartbeat racing against hers, two rhythms bound by survival. For the first time in years, Emily realized she wasn't just walking alone. She had someone worth protecting, and that knowledge gave her trembling steps, a strength she hadn't believed she still carried. Turning a corner, Emily's hope faltered as she faced a closed shelter gate, its iron bars locked and cold. She muttered bitterly, "Not tonight," gripping the cat tighter. The animal stirred uneasily, its claws kneading against her arm as if sensing her despair. The sign above was faded, reading City, Animal Care, a place that promised safety but was unreachable now. Emily leaned against the gate, shoulders shaking as the weight of exhaustion crashed down. The cat licked her damp sleeve, a fragile gesture that pierced through her despair. Emily's voice cracked, "Even when the world shuts us out, you're still here." The irony stung. Salvation was so close yet locked away, forcing her to choose between breaking or pushing forward again. She closed her eyes, whispering, "We don't stop here," drawing strength from the tiny heartbeat pressed against her chest. The night stretched on, a cruel test of endurance. Emily's steps dragged, yet she held the cat close, whispering, "You're the reason I keep moving." Her arms ached, her body numb from cold, but the warmth of the fragile life in her care burned brighter than her fatigue. The city's silence pressed in, broken only by the soft purr that finally rose from the cat, tentative yet real. Emily's breath caught, tears blurring the neon lights around her. "You trust me," she whispered, her voice trembling as if the realization itself was too heavy to bear. That fragile sound of trust carried more power than the storm, more than the cruelty they had faced. It was hope made real, pulsing in the arms of a woman who had long forgotten what it felt like to be needed. She pressed forward, no longer for herself, but for him. Dawn broke, painting the city in muted grays as Emily carried the cat into her small apartment. She whispered, "We made it," though exhaustion hung heavy in her voice. The cat stirred in her arms, scanning the unfamiliar walls with cautious eyes. Emily set him gently on a faded blanket, her chest rising with both relief and uncertainty. The scar on his side caught the light, jagged and cruel, a mark that spoke of pain she could not imagine. She whispered, "Who did this to you?" Her fingers hovered above the scar, but stopped short, fearing the weight of memories he might carry. The cat curled tightly, but its gaze lingered on her with trust more fragile than glass. Emily knew this wasn't just survival. Something deeper was hidden in those eyes, a truth waiting to break through the silence of his suffering. As the sun rose higher, Emily searched through the small collar she found tucked into the blanket of the box. Her heart froze when she saw the tag, scratched but still legible. "Oliver," she whispered, "so you had a name." The cat lifted its head, eyes locking on hers as if recognizing the sound. Emily's throat tightened. He wasn't just abandoned, he was once loved, once called by name. She stroked the rusted tag, murmuring, "Someone let you down, didn't they?" The weight of betrayal pressed on her chest, for she understood the pain of being cast aside despite once being chosen. Oliver pressed his nose against her wrist, a silent confirmation of all he had endured. In that fragile moment, Emily realized she was no longer saving a stray. She was restoring a lost soul who had been denied the love he still longed for. Later that day, Emily called a nearby clinic, hoping for help. A weary voice on the line said, "We know that cat. He was brought in months ago, abandoned after an injury." Emily's stomach twisted as she asked, "And no one came for him?" Silence answered louder than words, then a quiet, "People didn't want the burden." Her grip on the phone shook as Oliver brushed against her leg, unaware of the truth being spoken. Emily whispered to herself, "They gave up on him." Tears welled as she knelt, pulling him close. "But I won't." The revelation cut deep. He hadn't just been forgotten, he had been rejected deliberately. The cruelty of his past sharpened her resolve, turning her sorrow into fierce protection. For Emily, his scar was no longer just a wound. It was proof of his survival, and of the love he still deserved. That evening, Oliver curled at her feet, his breathing steady, his fragile body finally at rest. Emily sat nearby, unable to look away from him. She whispered, "You were left behind, but you're still here." The words filled the silence with both grief and hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to see the reflection of her own life, how she too had been abandoned by people who promised love and failed to keep it. She placed a hand gently on his side, above the scar, whispering, "We're alike, you and me." The bond no longer felt accidental. It was destiny shaped by pain, survival, and second chances. As Oliver stirred and nestled closer, Emily felt the heaviness in her chest lift, replaced by a clarity she had long been denied. Saving him was saving herself. Night fell again, but this time the silence felt different. Emily lay on the couch, Oliver curled against her chest, his purr steady, resonating like a heartbeat of trust. She whispered, "They couldn't see your worth, but I do." His scarred body rose and fell with each breath, proof that pain had not claimed him. Emily's gaze lingered on the shadows across her ceiling, her voice soft but certain, "We're not broken. Just waiting for someone to believe again." Oliver shifted, pressing his face into her chin, his small act of trust sealing the vow she had spoken aloud. For Emily, the twist of truth was not only about what Oliver had endured, but what he had given back. The reminder that even the abandoned could teach love stronger than betrayal. Together they had become a story of redemption written in scars and whispered promises. The next morning brought no peace. Emily carried Oliver to the vet, determined to seek help. But as she stepped inside, her chest tightened. Across the waiting room stood the man who had abandoned him, his cold eyes widening in recognition. He muttered sharply, "That's my cat." Emily's heart pounded, fury igniting through her veins. She whispered firmly, "No, he isn't yours anymore." Oliver pressed against her chest, trembling, his scar a silent testimony. The man sneered, claiming ownership, but the receptionist's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Emily held Oliver tighter, whispering, "You'll never go back to him." The air thickened with tension, the moment teetering between past cruelty and the fragile future she had promised. The confrontation Emily dreaded had arrived, and this time she knew she couldn't walk away. The man stepped closer, his voice loud and sharp, "He's mine. I'll take him back." Emily's hands shook, but her voice rose above his, "You gave him scars, you left him to die, you don't get to call him yours." Oliver hissed, ears flat, his body trembling but fierce in her arms. Other people in the clinic glanced uneasily, the weight of the argument drawing them in. The receptionist muttered, "We have records, sir. He was abandoned." Rage flickered across his face, but Emily stood her ground. She whispered to Oliver, "I'm not letting them hurt you again," her conviction unshakable. The man's fists clenched, his shadow stretching across the linoleum floor. For the first time in years, Emily wasn't defending just herself. She was fighting for a soul who had taught her what true loyalty meant. The man's voice rose, threatening, "You don't understand. He's nothing but trouble." Emily's fury burned hotter, her voice steady. "He's not trouble. He's survived everything you put him through. He's stronger than you'll ever be." Oliver buried his head against her chest, his fragile trust fueling her strength. The receptionist stood, declaring, "Sir, you lost any right when you abandoned him." The man's face twisted with rage, but he stepped back, his control slipping. Emily's legs trembled, yet she stood firm, whispering to Oliver, "You are not worthless. You are loved." The moment was no longer just about rescue. It was about rewriting the cruel narrative forced upon him. The man turned, muttering curses as he stormed out, his shadow leaving the clinic darker than the storm itself. Emily held Oliver tighter, her chest heaving, knowing this fight had changed them both. Silence followed the slammed door, but Emily's heart still raced as though the storm lingered inside her. She whispered to Oliver, "He's gone. You'll never see him again." The cat lifted his head, pressing his nose against her chin, his purr faint but steady. The receptionist approached gently, her voice softer now. "He deserves better. You gave him that." Emily nodded, her arms cradling him like fragile glass, realizing the weight of her vow had become unshakable. The scar was no longer just a reminder of pain. It was the proof of their survival together. Tears blurred her vision, but she whispered again, "You're safe now." In that fragile moment, the clinic's sterile walls no longer felt cold. They felt like the birthplace of redemption, where cruelty had been defeated by the strength of love and defiance. Later that night, Emily sat on her couch. Oliver nestled in her lap, his purr a steady rhythm that calmed her storm. She whispered, "You've given me something I never thought I'd have again, courage." Oliver blinked slowly, his eyes soft, his fragile trust now transformed into quiet strength. She stroked the scar gently, no longer recoiling but honoring it as part of his story. "They tried to break you, but you survived," she murmured. Her voice steadied, firm, "and so did I." In that quiet room, the climax of their journey settled not in grand triumph, but in the undeniable truth. Survival itself was victory. The bond between them was no longer fragile. It was unbreakable, forged in the fire of cruelty, and redeemed through unwavering love. Emily closed her eyes, whispering, "We made it," as Oliver's purr filled the night with peace. Morning light poured into Emily's apartment, washing away the shadows of the night before. She sat on the floor with Oliver in her lap, his purr steady as a heartbeat. She whispered, "We survived, and now we begin again." The cat stretched lazily, his scar visible yet no longer defining him. Emily traced a finger along his fur, smiling softly, as tears shimmered in her eyes. The storm had passed, and in its place was quiet peace. She thought of the man's words, sharp as knives, but their power had crumbled. What remained was only Oliver's warmth pressed against her. Emily said, "They broke us once, but they'll never break us again." Her chest swelled with a fragile pride, not only for him but for herself. Together, they were no longer abandoned. They were home. Emily opened her window, letting fresh air sweep through the room. Oliver padded toward the sill, his paws tentative but eager. She said gently, "Go on, the world isn't just cruel, there's beauty too." He sniffed at the breeze, eyes wide as sunlight caught in their green depths. For the first time, his tail flicked with curiosity instead of fear. Emily watched with a soft smile, whispering, "This is what freedom feels like." The scars he carried would never vanish, but here he was, alive, curious, and unafraid. She felt the same stirring within herself, a freedom from the chains of her own past. The world beyond the window was uncertain, yet no longer terrifying. Together, they had rewritten their story, not as broken souls, but as survivors who had found new beginnings. Later, Emily sat at the kitchen table with a notebook open, her pen moving slowly across the page. Oliver curled nearby on a chair, his eyes half closed in contentment. She wrote, This is our story, one of pain but also survival. Each word she wrote seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders. She looked at Oliver and said softly, "You've given me back my voice." His purr vibrated through the quiet room like an answer. The pages filled not with sorrow but with hope, with reminders that brokenness could be rebuilt into strength. Emily smiled, whispering, "We'll never be forgotten again." The sound of his steady breathing grounded her, proof that even in silence their bond spoke louder than words. In writing his story, she realized she was also writing her own redemption. In the afternoon, Emily took Oliver outside for the first time since the storm. She carried him in her arms, his eyes wide, ears flicking at the sounds of children playing nearby. She whispered, "It's okay, the world isn't as dark as it once was." He pressed closer to her chest but didn't resist, his trembling softer this time. A little girl approached, smiling shyly, and asked, "Can I pet him?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. Oliver flinched, but allowed the child's hand to brush his fur, his eyes softening. Emily's heart swelled, whispering, "You're learning to trust again." In that moment, she realized healing wasn't just theirs. It was something they could share, spreading outward like ripples in water. That night, Emily lay in bed with Oliver curled beside her, his soft purr filling the room. She whispered, "This is what peace feels like." His scarred body pressed against her side, no longer a symbol of pain, but of resilience. She thought of the battles they had faced, the rain, the cruelty, the confrontation, all of it leading here to a quiet moment of safety. Emily closed her eyes, whispering, "You've taught me love again." Oliver shifted, nestling closer, his steady breath blending with hers. The silence was no longer heavy with loneliness. It was gentle, filled with trust. For Emily, the resolution was not in forgetting the past, but in embracing the future. A life where love once denied had found its way back through a scarred but unbroken soul. The following morning, golden light spilled across Emily's apartment, softening every corner it touched. Oliver stretched on the windowsill, his eyes glowing with quiet strength. Emily whispered, "Look at you. Alive, whole, unafraid." The scars on his side were visible in the sunlight, not as marks of weakness, but as symbols of survival. Emily placed her hand gently on the glass, her reflection merging with his. She murmured, "You've given me back more than I ever thought possible." Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the silent triumph inside these walls. But for Emily and Oliver, this was victory. Survival transformed into hope, pain reborn into love. Later that day, Emily carried Oliver outside, the world brighter than it had ever been. She whispered, "This is your second chance." The park was alive with laughter, sunlight shimmering through leaves. Oliver perched in her arms, ears flicking but eyes calm. Children ran past, their joy weaving into the air, yet he remained steady. Emily smiled, whispering, "You're not afraid anymore." The breeze carried the scent of blossoms, wrapping them in peace. For Emily, this moment wasn't just freedom for Oliver. It was freedom for her too. Together they stepped into the sunlight, not as victims of abandonment, but as survivors who had chosen love over fear. At the park's edge, Emily set Oliver gently on the grass. He hesitated at first, paws sinking into soft earth, then stepped forward, nose twitching with discovery. Emily whispered, "Go on, the world belongs to you too." His green eyes shone as he patted further, his movements no longer burdened by fear. The scar across his side caught the light, turning into a badge of resilience. Emily's chest tightened with pride, her voice trembling. "You are stronger than what they did to you." In that moment, she saw not a broken cat, but a survivor standing tall, his tiny frame carrying a spirit larger than any cruelty. Oliver turned back, his eyes meeting Emily's, and then he ran to her, leaping into her lap. She laughed through tears, whispering, "You chose me." His paws pressed into her legs, his purr loud, a declaration of trust that silenced every cruelty of his past. Emily cradled him, her heart racing, realizing this moment was not just his victory but hers. She whispered, "We are family now." Around them, the world blurred. But in their embrace clarity reigned, love had conquered abandonment, trust had defeated fear. Their story no longer belonged to shadows but to light, carried in every beat of their hearts pressed together. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emily walked home with Oliver nestled peacefully in her arms. She whispered, "We made it against everything." His head rested against her shoulder, eyes closing as though finally at peace. The world around them hummed quietly, yet the moment felt eternal. Emily's steps were steady, no longer weighed down by loneliness, but lifted by love reborn. She whispered one last time, "Thank you for teaching me how to love again." Oliver's soft purr answered, filling the fading light with warmth. Together, they vanished into the glow of dusk, not as a woman and a stray, but as two souls who had healed each other, leaving behind scars, yet carrying forward a love unbreakable.